thought this is more like we're trying to just to share what we have done. Actually, it's not just my work. I should acknowledge that number of respected people was involved in the research I'm going to present today, including Pak Tommy Firman, Professor Tommy Firman. I also have a professor from the Netherlands, Johan Walter. He helps a lot during the research. So, by asking about trying to pick up a topic in my research that has a close connection to development issue, and hopefully this has quite sharing topics and also interests and also problems that we discuss interdisciplinary, hopefully. But clearly I'm coming from planning. In the past we were like planning department, now we merged with architecture and policy development, and probably some terms could be biased to planning, but trying to moderate it a little bit. What I'm going to present is about, actually, in the paper, the title is more like suburbanization. I think that's one of the very big challenges in managing cities in Indonesia, because the number of cities are getting bigger and it expanded rapidly into their hinterlands and peripheral areas, and the numbers of development issues could arise along with this. And one of the, I think in the past months or years, one of the discussion is actually we were trying to asking ourselves or even the policymakers about the role of Jakarta in relation to other cities, regions, or indeed in a smaller scale is Jakarta in relation to its neighboring districts and municipalities, and probably to some extent many of the issues I will share here is more like the issues between Jakarta and its surrounding districts, maybe for the other with the other regions, Pakomara or the others. Yeah. So we picked Jakarta is with reasons. Of course, Jakarta is always still the biggest cities in Indonesia. But what is also interesting, even in the scale of East Asia, is Jakarta is the most suburbanized mega city in Asia. It's according to some research, and the latest one is conducted by a group of Japanese professors. If we compare Jakarta with Bangkok, Manila, that's the three biggest mega cities, and Jakarta is the most suburbanized, meaning more activities are expanded into outside the main city. And in the past decades, quite many policymakers in this country and also researchers still focusing on like how to manage the suburbanization of population. Like the people is moving out the cities and how they will commute and that create problems. And it's already ongoing discussion for some decades. But what is lacking, I think, until today, there are some discussions that are still lacking is how not just the population that is dispersing from the city, but also the economic activities. And that's, I think, in some ways, the dispersion of economic activities could create bigger problems, or if we could manage it properly, I think it can be a better opportunity to manage the regions. So, and try to be focused as far as the research concern is to see the main economic activities that are contribute the most to the GDP is manufacturing. So we're going to see how the manufacturing is distributed in the metropolitan regions, how does it change, and whether their distribution has a special implication, like whether, as in the title shown, is whether Jakarta is being challenged in centrality. Because at least from the political mindset or popular perspective, we always see Jakarta is the center of everything, I guess. I would say Jakarta is the center of everything of this country, and that's well, that's even higher discussion about it. But try to limit it in the metropolitan scale. Jakarta is often seen themselves as the center of Jabodetabek, at least, or the center of the metropolitan area, and that's a kind of to some extent also I think decentralization impact, like the bigger the city, they are the boss of the region, something like that. And I'm trying to uncover that actually, at least at some points, Jakarta would be not as big or as not important as they wish. And that's the moment that we can try to see a different perspective, to see how the development in the regions. Try to just to be quick in a more theoretical perspective, but try to be not so much technical terms. I use the term reconcentrations, meaning like, as I told you, it's more like suburbanization, or how urbanization properties are moving out from the cities. But actually there are a bigger term of this deconcentration, like from economic perspective especially, we are thinking like Java Islands, how the people or activities from Java Islands moving out to Sumatra or Kalimantan. But that's not my focus, maybe Kakomada later. Try to be more strict on the metropolitan scale or region. So there are dispersal of population and employment, and from a quantitative perspective, the easiest way is to see that the share of urban activities, if we compare the main city and the rural or the urban areas, is like in different trends year by year, while the city is declining and the suburbs or the peripheral areas is increasing. I mentioned in the beginning, there are different types of deconcentration. We know quite a lot about how population has dispersed from Jakarta city. I think a lot of us, or some of us, lived in fact outside the city of Jakarta. So it's already decades phenomenon. But I think still not yet very much understanding that actually there are also potential that employment center could also disperse into the suburbs. In the developed countries like in the US, Europe, they are more like analyzing, actually it's already like the third sector, the business sector is dispersing from, so like the BCA, Menara BCA, how we can see Menara BCA in Bekasi or in Karawang. That's what is happening in developed countries. But from my macro data, maybe we as in the industrializing countries, not yet very much it's not yet very much happening, like service sector, like offices, especially offices actually, is dispersing into the suburb. It's not yet worldwide phenomena in Jakarta region. But what is very much strong phenomena in the past decades is how the secondary sectors, especially manufacturing, has dispersed, has gone out from the city into the suburbs. So we'll see how the industry has disconcentrated. And maybe still some bias into my discipline, planning. We always talk about space. Everything is connected to space. Maybe that's our limitation, but maybe it has, I think it's also can, because different economic, social, and any issue also has implication on space. So if we see like how the activities suburbanized, there are at least two possible implications or two possible spatial forms that can emerge. First, the centrist perspective, seeing like all the activities or collection of activities tend to close with each other, as happening in the city. So what is happening in the suburbs is very much likely as what is happening in the city. Like there will be a compact development in the suburbs. That's the first hypothesis, because from economical theory, every activities tend to close with each other. So it's more like relocation of groups of activities with still in close together. In the Western perspective, some terms has emerged like new downtowns, how new downtowns is created in the suburbs, or edge cities, meaning the cities that are built on the edge of the old cities. At metropolitan or regional scale, it's more like polycentric cities. Many cities, so it's not Jakarta, but there are some cities around Jakarta. But there are more. This is more radical, maybe radical perspective to see that the implication is enormous, because not just in economic wise, but in technological perspective. Many things has changed. How people move, how we use technology like mobile phone, and that could affect how activities reallocate in the space. So from the decentralized perspective, the moving of activities to the suburbs, considering how the technology has changed, the transport mode has changed, will change the way they allocate in the city. While in the cities tend to close to each other, like in the CBD especially, we see how offices are next to each other and we can walk. Although, as my colleague said, it's sweaty if I walk from that building. But at least from a distant perspective, it's still like walkable areas. But from this perspective, what would happen in the suburbs if new centers built in suburbs? It's going to be more low density. It's far from each other. We have to go from one place to another by car, so it's more like sprawling. At the regional, it's more like chaotic structure. So many smaller cities that are sometimes not easy to recognize. So try to focus on the case study or the object we are researching, Greater Jakarta. This is also a politically, currently is still, I think, eye-catching terms, and not yet in academic terms. In our worlds, we use Greater Jakarta. So, but I use it for some reasons, because before this we always talk about Jabodetabek. Well, the real activities, system of activities is already gone beyond Jabodetabek. I'm not using the commuting perspective because, as I told you, it's more like population. Some people has done it, and commuting is still like Jabodetabek phenomena. But I'm looking like more economic activities. It's already gone beyond Jabodetabek. So I use the term Greater Jakarta, because not just Jabodetabek. Jabodetabek means Jakarta city and the surroundings, kota and kabupaten, districts and municipalities. But there are still some other hinterlands that economically very much integrated into Jakarta. If you see industrial areas in Karawang, in Serang, they are connected with Jakarta economically. Maybe not in terms of population daily commuting, not in the commuting wise, but in terms of daily economic activities. Like today I saw how, I didn't put the picture, but how new trucks just fresh from the factories. I think it's more like container truck, but it's only the head gone to, it's passing through the highways. It seems they are going to the other factories from Karawang, maybe in Capung or whatever, and they will be combined with the back side of the truck, or I don't know. So it's kind of systems of production taking place in different areas, not just in the limits of Jabodetabek, even from Karawang. So that is what I know in Greater Jakarta. Because I'm focusing on like manufacturing, this extension tend to be into the eastern and western. The eastern is Karawang, and the west is Serang. But from other perspective, like environmental perspective, even in the policy discussion, we already talked about Puncak and Cianjur. So Jabodetabek, mainly Jabodetabek, to discuss about sustainability of these regions is no longer very much fit into the scale of the problems. And what the main driver of this industrial development is, as far as we saw in the field, is like formal industrial parks or kawasan industry. They are considered, from at least from spatial perspective, they are the ones who prepare this relocation of industries, because they could prepare quite a large plot of lands in the suburbs. We see like this is all data, I mean, from previous research, just to show us like the population of the suburbs of Jakarta has long surpassed the one in the city. So no wonder that most of us commute every day and takes hours in the field. But this is more like my interest is to see not just the people that is moving out the city, but the investment and secondary sectors, and the largest part of it is manufacturing, is still the biggest share of economy of the regions. And most of these sectors are located in the suburbs. Foreign direct investment is more than just a manufacturing indicator, but even deeper than it. FDI also indicates the level of globalization of the regions. So if we see like the city in Singapore or Hong Kong, if we talk about global city or the city that are economically integrated into the world economies, we mostly talk about the CBD of the city. But what is happening in Jakarta is different. The indicators of globalization not so much, or at least not just, can be seen in the Sudirman Tamrin district, but also in the suburbs. We never know. So maybe in terms of real economy, could be bigger than just in the CBD. I mean, I'm talking about the real economy. And we see like it's increasing, more and more investments are happening in Bodetabek, in the suburbs, and now it's almost 90%. Well, this is just to show how the I should acknowledge this. The basic maps was actually prepared by Erna with the team. Because like land use change, and we see how the physical change has been drawn. This is Jakarta, sorry. I was still thinking like this. Maybe some of you not very much familiar with it. This is Jakarta and this is Jabodetabek. So before the industrialization, which is 80s, the limits of this is physical development, housing, offices, and other economic activities. Before the industrialization, before the Suharto, the regulation policy, of course, where the industry is boosting very rapidly, the physical development of Jakarta is still within the boundary of the city. But now we see it's expanded into the east, west, and south. To some extent, this is correspond with the development of highways. So I think at least if we are discussing about the manufacturing or industry, it is no longer relevant if we talk only the limits of Jabodetabek. Of course, still, Cikarang is still the main industrial center in Indonesia. It's the biggest, and I could show if I have time that Cikarang is contribute to 50% of the manufacturing in Jabodetabek. But now, not just Cikarang. Cikarang is still within Bekasi, but we are also surveying, like in Karawang, which is beyond boundary of Jabodetabek. There are more and more industrial plots being built there, and we can predict if the global economy and the national economy is in expected trend, Karawang will be much bigger than Bekasi in the future. And now they are very much worried about how to manage. They don't want to be the second Bekasi. What do you mean by second Bekasi? Maybe I will talk to you later. There are a lot of problems. Regardless, Bekasi is very much economic engine of Jabodetabek from manufacturing perspectives. There are so many problems, social problems. So this is Jabodetabek. This is the city, and this is for simple analytical purposes, I divided Greater Jakarta into several districts or zones from the city, and then inner suburbs, outer suburbs, and this is the extension, extra outer suburbs. And this is, at least this is recognizable industrial parks that are occupying Greater Jakarta. There are many more, but it's too small, so I just try to illustrate where the big industrial parks located. And we see the most concentration is in Cikarang, Bekasi, and here is in Karawang. It's so quite, like Foxconn is going to be placed here, the Apple supplier, and this is a quite large concentration in Cikarang. This is interesting. I took the data from the private consultants. I didn't acknowledge here. Colliers International. They did quite good surveys every year about the progress of land development in metropolitan areas. And since 90s, there are no more industrial parks in Jakarta. Of course, Jakarta, the industrial parks is maybe almost 90 or 100%, maybe 90%. It's located in North Jakarta, most probably in Cakung. And this is the time for the suburbs to, until 2010, well, some economists, maybe some of you know much better than me, like now it seems like now we are in the phase of the second boom of economy. The first one is in 90s. So this industrial lands was kind of speculation or anticipation due to the economic boom during the late Suharto era. So they picking a lot of lands in the suburbs, feeling like the FDI is coming in all the time. But in fact, there was an economic crash in the late 90s. So in reality, most of their land were not occupied. So if I try to draw, this is the like this 90s. Let's say this was the supply of industrial land. It was peaking at the end of Suharto era, because of the economic boom and many developers buy lands for the industries in the suburbs. And while the demand was more like, it's just very much rough illustration. This was more like the demand. And this is 97, the crisis. And then suddenly, jump. Some investment are moving out. And actually, there is not so much development until, I don't know, some of you economists might know better than me, but maybe, I don't know, 2008 or 9 started picking up again. Now, this is our situation now. There is a gap between supply and demand. So, if I have some money, maybe I will put investment for industrial land at the moment, because I heard in many medias that many investors are like waiting for new lands to be built so the factories can be installed there. Much more fluctuation because of the crisis can be seen in the land price of these industries, and now it's picking up more than just this curve. The price is more like fluctuation. How many minutes do I have?
I think I have 15 more minutes.
Well, just to give a broader picture how the process took place. I put here like FDI is kind of one of the main drivers of the industrialization, and we see like actually there are some phases of industrial development in Indonesia, or particularly in Jabodetabek. The first is in the beginning of Suharto administration. He promoted the industrialization from the beginning of his office. At the time, most of industry were placed in industrial zone. Atau zona industri in Indonesian terms, meaning it's more like dedicated place where you can place your industries, but there are no management, no planning for this area. What is happening like in the textile agglomeration, like you can see factories next to settlements, so it's not yet environmentally good way development, because there are industry, there are housings next to each other, unplanned areas. But after the environmental policy in the 90s, the government requested industry to be built in the kawasan industry or industrial park or planned industrial areas. And in the beginning, it was like government initiative, especially in Jakarta. What I mean CBD is Jakarta, especially in North Jakarta and some in other parts of Jakarta. There are some industrial estates built by the governments, taking advantage of the closeness to the international ports. But this is the dramatic change that's happening after 80s, after some deregulation measures made by the presidents, especially allowing private companies to build industrial estates, also allowing giving more incentive for FDI to come in, and then the industrial park, which was built by government, now is more built by the private, and mostly located in the suburbs. They went to suburbs because they're looking for a cheap land, large plot, cheap land, and also closeness to highways. And this is one of the main results of our analysis, how if we see the centrality of, as the title was proposing, the centrality of Jakarta from industrial perspective, we can see that Jakarta is not that important. what is it? The darker the mark is like indicating centrality. So this is the dark side. The dark marks is not just in Jakarta, but we see this is in 1995, just the beginning of booming activities. If we see compared to 2001, this is now more and more centers built in the suburbs, and Jakarta just keep that way, never change. But it's also interesting if we compare these three developments. First is more centers built in the suburbs, and the second is actually the number of the dark area is decreasing. If we calculate the total area of this dark part is less than in 90s. While in reality the employment is, of course, in 2010 is more employment than in 90s. That indicates actually like this industrial employment is getting more compact. Most probably is moving into industrial parks. This is from number of employment tenaga kerja industri. Jakarta is declining. Even the inner suburbs like Kota Bekasi, Kota Karawang, is declining. But the outer suburbs, Kabupaten Bekasi, Kabupaten Bogor, Tangerang, is increasing. And more dramatic is in beyond this Jabodetabek. Extra outer is not within Jabodetabek. This is Karawang and Serang. They have 1.5 times more employment in the past 15 years. From our perspective, planning perspective, this is very interesting for us because we talk about how to manage space. What is happening is in the plan concentration. Plan concentration is a sub-district where industrial parks located. So we define plan as the ones where industrial parks located. It's increasing almost twice. While in unplanned concentration, like in zona industri or in sprawling areas, is declining. While we see the total of employment is increasing. And the second result of our analysis is the first is we indicate how different centers are emerged in the suburbs, and we see whether these different centers has similar function or different from economic perspective. So we conduct an LK analysis, location equation analysis, whether in these centers they have the same economic or industrial sectors or different. And it's quite interesting because we see there are specialization between industrial centers, especially if we draw the lines between the Jakarta into the extra outer suburbs. There are divisions of employment, division of sectors, and it's changing. In the 1995, well, maybe many of you knows that LP is indicating. Wait, you know. Yeah, if I tell LK1 advantage, it has the basis of economic sector, something like that. So one is a clue indicating that this area has a basis food sector. This is Jakarta, so in 1995, more like light industry, food, but also textile, machinery is located in CBD. CBD is Jakarta. while the suburbs is more like energy, wood, paper, and it's changing. In the 2010s, we see like in 90s, more industry were located in Jakarta, but now in CBD we only see like foods, clothing, publishing. It's more like market. Call it, I'm using economic words, but it's more like consumer goods maybe.
Retail.
Sorry, retail.
Retail, maybe. Is that what you mean? Retail.
Yeah, retail. Yeah. While the suburbs building their specialization, like this is what's wrong with the computer. The eastern suburb, Cikarang, Karawang, they specialized in like automotive, electronics, machinery. While the western suburbs, Cikande, Tangerang, they are specializing in textile, mining, and Cilegon is very much on natural resources based industry like energy, wood, metals. Still have 5 minutes, I guess. Just to show you the significance, Cikarang is currently still receiving about 50% FDI. So I talked to, I don't know if any of you were there, I talked to some of people in Peru. If I were a terrorist, I will not bomb Sudirman, but I will bomb Cikarang. Because that's the engine of that's easy, like at least if I use like 20th century way of attacking, like during World War, when the Allies attacked Germany, it was not Berlin that was first attacked, but the industrial areas, rural areas. And that also might be some of our enemy want to destroy us. They will first bomb Cikarang, because if you bomb Cikarang, the economy will stop, because that's how the real economy first producing. You see, like for example, 46% of the non-oil export is coming in from Cikarang. Can you imagine the country as big as Indonesia? It's very much how maybe disparity or centrality. So maybe well, I'm not anti-Jakarta, but I'm just saying to see a different perspective, to see how different places in Jabodetabek would have important role. But this is what is happening in this biggest concentration of industry. In fact, in Southeast Asia, in terms of size, Cikarang is the largest concentration of manufacturing in Southeast Asia. But this is the situation, like the infrastructure, it's so much fragmented, and this is one of the funniest thing I've ever seen in my life, actually. Because like how this is different. This is different kinds of industry. This number of industrial parks, and they are not connected with each other. And the funny thing is, it's more like politically or even nationality or nationalism. Because since the beginning of Cikarang development, the government requested all the industrial parks. I'm sorry, there are some people from industrial parks in Cikarang, but this is more like the government asked them to build connecting roads that would connect all these industrial estates. the impact is, one of the objective is to decrease the dependency on the toll road. Because the current situation, if you want to go from Egypt to MM 2100, the most efficient is go to the highways. So every local traffic go through the highways. It's not, from planning perspective, it's not desirable. But what is happening, indeed they build the roads. But after decades, they never really connect them with each other, which is compared to how you build this length of road and you just need to build additional one bridge. It's not that expensive, but it's never been done. And some of the discussion is also related to politically or nationalism of the investors, because but it still needs to be further researched. Many industries in MM represents, I don't know, Korean investors, or while in Egypt is Japanese, so they don't want. So, for example, if MM build the bridge, it will benefits the people or the industry in Delta Silicon, while they are in competing situation. So it's not desirable from their business. And what is also striking is social division. For example, the industrial estates has per capita income even twice as Jakarta. So around the industrial estates in the gated communities, and also the industry, this is more like the economic productivity, twice as Jakarta per population. But just in the immediate kecamatan's, very poor. This is the suburbs. So this is Cikarang, is the industrial estate, and the suburbs, rural, is like kecamatan around Cikarang, Bekasi, and it's considered one of the poorest in Jawa Barat. Overall, Kabupaten Bekasi is one of daerah tertinggal in Jawa Barat. So how come the engine of growth of this country is actually the place where the poorest people is located? That's and we see also how is actually the private sector is very good. They have a very strong capability of management. So, but maybe we just still not very much capture their potentials. They can build infrastructure. It's also funny, it's not the government that provides infrastructure for the industry, but what is happening, in Cikarang, this is the private industries, the private estates. For example, PLN buy some electricity from Cikarang. So it's the other way around. It's not the government serve the private, but the private serve the government. This is also how this suburban city also transforming and can be formed into a service sector. So maybe just try to be short. This is more summary. What is the main points? It's how Jakarta actually is declining from, at least from a manufacturing perspective, and along this development is more and more private sector has played more role rather than the government. And we see the spatial structure is coming into more polycentric rather than sprawling, but still in the beginning, because more industries coming into the planned areas. Also, there are some specialization among centers, and there are some policy implications. Maybe for some of us this is more important, but this is more indicative. Actually, we don't see government in this process. That's the problem, and that's one of the root why those problems occurs. Maybe if like in this industrial concentration, if government can coordinate better, build visions, plans, so like they can work together. Also, what also important is the linkage with the local economy. In other research we conducted, this university has no connection with the local economies. Of course, they always connect to other industries outside the regions. Also, what is also important is the capacity of the local governments. We see like good employees located in Jakarta, while I see like in Kabupaten Bekasi, Karawang. I hope that, I don't know if there's anyone here. I saw like they need more capacity just to manage themselves. How could this rural style government has to manage FDI with the complexity of development like you see in this Sudirman? And that's very much contrast. Like funny story, like the industrial estate asking for the building building codes because they want to build new buildings, and what is the regulations? And the government say, no, we don't have the regulation, can you make it for me, and we will adopt it for other regions. So they don't know, or at least they are not ready to really cope with the development. And what is also important is the building of regional institutions, because actually the point is, my presentation is how this economy is, the economic system is take place at the regional scale, not at the city scale. Jakarta themselves cannot grow without Cikarang or others. They are interdependent and not, so it should be not one-way dependency. The suburbs depends on Jakarta, but we have to see it in more two ways, and that's how robust cooperation could happen. If we still see like I'm the boss, you are the followers, then there will be no cooperation forever, I think. We need to see like other places outside Jakarta is equally important in different ways, because from that communication could take place. And also if we see about this globalizing economy, we cannot neglect that private sector is take an active role. If we neglect them at all at the decision-making process, it's gonna be like the earth and planet, the sky. It's never connected, because like I have discussion with Jakarta Jabodetabek cooperating body, the KSP, all governments. We talk as if what is happening on the paper is what is happening on the field, but in fact it's different. We are talking about something different with the real development on the ground, which is very much private occupied. Also, it's important to give more incentives to really specialize different centers, giving more incentives for investors who wish to build in a proper place. Also, from environmental perspective, is we have already quite some environmental regulations, but always the implementation is the problem. So I think that's this is an order from my colleague to, when I present this in Germany, colleague of mine, and if any more investment in Indonesia. So thank you. That's the end of the presentation.
Stand up, or you can sit on that. Yeah.
Terima kasih Bu Lydia. Hi everybody, I'm glad to be discussing of this session because actually colleague me, ITB, Institute of Technology Bandung, has developed a lot of scenario and analysis on many regional development, city development. So that's why at the same time I learned colleague from Institute of Technology Bandung. Actually, when I got this paper, it's quite interesting. I think just recall again the topic, industrial urbanization in Greater Jakarta. But I think for some of you, well, this old research done by World Bank, I think 70s, using data, I think 30 years of national development in all of the world, there is the so-called structural transformations, or sometimes they call it normal pattern. Some of you probably know this, where the economy through time will be shifted from primary sector, secondary sector, and then services sector. And a colleague, Delik, already saw at regional level, and we see that Jakarta already shifted. Well, primary sector or production base is no more, well, less and less exists in Jakarta. So they concentrated on the second or manufacturing sector. But even then, in his analysis, is shifted to the other regions. That's one point of this. That's happening as well. When Pak Delik mentioning in developed countries, the concentration now is on services. Yeah, we are not at that stage. Although Jakarta, probably the service sector is high, but a lot of them is quote-unquote informal sector of services. So, although some sophisticated services like government, of course, central government, and also IT, or telecommunication, and financial sector is dominated, and a lot of headquarter office here. So, and that kind of services is, yes, grow and grow in Jakarta. So, focus on Jakarta first. Yeah, Jakarta is, they forced to be more efficient in using very, space limited area. So they have, although by design, sometimes, yeah, you mentioning that sometimes the planner, especially local government, or even in the central government, lag behind the economic force of the private sector. Naturally, Jakarta should find or looking for the so-called high value added activities. There's natural, actually, alami lah, yeah, because it's very limited land, they have to do that. But Pak Harto is 30 years, right? Now after Reformasi is 40 years. Yes, there is a progress, but it's not much if you compare with your neighboring country. Malaysia, Thailand, not compared with Singapore. When I read and see Mas Delik presentation, I remember Tanjung Pelepas, sport, or in Thailand. If you look at the picture, the suburbanizations or concentrated industrialization is still in surrounding, especially to the east, Cikarang, Kerawang, and west to Balaraja and Cikarang, and to some extent is Bogor, Sukabumi for textile. But if you look at the picture, the port is still Tanjung Priok. It means that either that for domestic through Java, 60% is in Java, although Pak Delik mentioning 60% of Cikarang exported. So that's why we struggling hardly when from Bandung to Jakarta during bedtime, because so many cars, heavy containers. Look at it. Here and but infrastructure just only this. So that's why colleague from Bandung now asking, can we build up there? Ketua Bapeda, who's that? Fuad there. Pak Joni Juanda asking central government to give a lot of focus to the east, I don't know why not the West, because there are some argument during Pak JK in, what is it, Bojonegara. Discussion has disappeared now. I don't know. But colleague from Bandung now is pushing to that area, that one, because it's very, very. The space is very limited and so many crowded, and it's not very high quality as well compared to Thailand and Malaysia, you know. In the paper, Delik using employment ratio to population means that at the same time employment also dispersed throughout the regions, to surrounding Jakarta. And in the real paper, in the original paper, of course the population also in Jakarta, okay, Jakarta population growth is now 1.3, but in surrounding area, Botabek is 5.1, Bogor 2.9, Depok higher than 3 actually. Now is population dispersed to the region. But the problem is, let me tell you, there are some issues that we have. How about the so-called cities facilities, fasilitas umum, for example? So that's why in Depok, in Bogor, well, even in Bekasi, not in the industrial park, is very nice, wide road and so on, but in the center of the city, Tangerang, is very, very unplanned wisely. So that's why I think Jakarta problem later on can be found in surrounding area as well. During the weekends, the traffic jam is not happening in Bandung, but also in Bogor, in Bekasi to some extent, because everybody is from Jakarta, surrounding area. The capacity of local infrastructure is not very, very in line with the pressure of populations. And but of course, the land price, I checked to Joyce about is there any different of land price, but partly in the paper contrasting industrial park land price. Yes, of course, now it's tending to increase in the surrounding area. But if you look at this one, to some extent, Jakarta is still dominated. Yang tabel LQ Industrial Center, yeah. To some extent, Jakarta is still not here. Although there is dispersed to other areas, but the concentration of the quote-unquote comparative advantage of Jakarta in producing this still there. Means Jakarta is still, have some advantage, although in terms of spaces, other region is, but not quite as Balaraja is on industry berat, yeah, heavy industry, so machinery, Cikarang ini otomotif ya. Nah, saya sebenarnya would like to see Bogor. Ada student from Bogor kan? Because Bogor is going to be not heavy industry, not much industry, but this is quite interesting actually. Quite interesting to explore to an extent. Bogor, for example, in line with the development of expansion of industrialization actually. Because I think for the macro perspective, 60% of GDP coming from Java, and from Jabodetabek is around 20%. Means that it's very productive, but so many very limited space and not enough capacity, as you mentioned, for public facilities and so on and surrounding area. Then make the life in the Bodetabek is not well, not nice in the sense that what we would like to have a kind of livable cities or something. Ya, jadi mesti still substandard on that. And city infrastructure, yes, partial. And if you look at the Pulau Gadung, for example, Cikarang, yes, it's very nice, but Pulau Gadung is unbelievable. I think 2 weeks ago I've been there. Getting worse and worse. Production concentrated is still there, but the infrastructure is karena kan angkutannya very happy, trucking kan, wow, and surrounding community is very packed. A lot of density is, I think, a lot of criminal issues in there. So I think we have to, in terms of social life, is going to be hard. What had I to fragmented? You already mentioned, yes. When you exploring income per capita, yes, of course, GDP per capita. Of course, per capita in industrial estates is higher than Jakarta. But if you look at the local community, is very like Papua. Yeah, everybody knows that because it's too macro in terms of per capita. I think we should looking for example, Human Development Index at local level. So to what extent people at community get benefit, otherwise it's lag behind. Process of capacity, local governments. I'm a bit sad, especially colleague from government sector here. With the extreme voices, actually government's not involved so much in this process. Wow, that's Pak Delik mentioning about that. And this is actually a pity for us. Now because the private sector is much more looking ahead to grab the market, to grab the Indonesia's, because domestic consumers very big here with 250. Yes, although some are exported, but not much actually. So I think if we are exploring FDI later on to Indonesia, beside of a macro fiscal policy about license, izin and so on, but you mentioning about supply of land. There's a headache issues for Indonesia, and a lot of infrastructure development is blocked by the land issues. People discussing about so-called MP3AE, at the end is land availability, and that's happen as you figure out. Jakarta is already stagnated, but Jakarta is. Everybody look at the TBC Matupang. Now it's growing. There's a student in our program exploring that because here is already pretty high, pretty expensive, and moving to some TBC Matupang. But I don't know whether, yeah, of course, land speculation is very high, and colleague from Untar, Professor Haidir Makari, actually got ideas. Actually, the government should anticipate it about that, development with imposing relatively high tax on PBB, for example, but not always ketinggalan, from government side. That's the issues, and then my calculation is, I think this kind of process still on and on for the future. It's probably 3 decades ahead, because if the program of industrialization in the outer islands is not, for example, is given a lot of incentive, although now SMP3 trying to, as Lydia mentioned, not exploit raw material anymore. That's if imposed strictly, that's actually to some extent creates new opportunity to develop other regions instead of only Jabodetabek and Jawa. But I think ini masih a long way to go, because in outer regions, Kalimantan, even Sumatra, still to some extent quote-unquote virgin area. A colleague from Kalimantan, for example, is asking a lot of infrastructure, roads, ports, or even electricity. So I think that's our development in the futures. But I think not the moral story of this session. The message is, can we, for example, this kind of development is not anymore happening in others, especially in outer regions. I have not mentioning about facilities like housing, for example. Why? Instead of, well, Jakarta is probably middle class upper is pretty eager to buy apartment and so on. But for what's that? For lower MBR, masyarakat berpenghasilan rendah, untuk housing, the government DKI is difficult to realize the program because of land issues as well. It's very, very expensive. Nah, sebetulnya in the outer regions itu harus kalau kita lihat kan, if you look at right now, tidak ada perkembangan rusun-rusun yang agak konkret juga di sekitar Jabodetabek. Jadi ini sebetulnya kesempatan juga untuk, jadi maksudnya selain sekarang isu banjir, bagaimana the surrounding region, especially puncak, untuk apa nih, kita pengen exploring about the environmental services. Pak Ahok would like to pay untuk that's good idea to some extent, but we have to explore. But also housing, for example, itu harus agak sedikit berkembang di pinggiran gitu. Kalau tidak mau di sini, walaupun tadi aspek komuternya sekarang memang membuat headache ya, tapi kalau ada housing di sekitar Bodetabek itu agak soalnya begini, Pemda DKI sekarang sedang exercising the so-called RP4D, rencana pembangunan perumahan pemukiman daerah ya. Dari kalkulasi teman-teman konsultan itu mentioning about DKI kekurangan 70.000 housing. Itu untuk skala yang lower class people. Kalau misalnya satu household itu 5 kebanyakan 3,5 juta, ya karena 3 juta penduduk perlu ya. My question is to colleague in DKI, Anda mau bangun semua itu di Jakarta, harusnya Anda tadi agak sedikit wise, agak jauh kerjasama dengan Bogor, Bekasi, Tangerang untuk di split di sana gitu. Nah, ini jadi saya congratulations to presentation Pak, dan juga your work. Paling tidak from analytical point of view, exploring Jakarta udah berubah, walaupun data-data masih tetap ya kayaknya mendominasi. Memang bergeser ke services ya. Oleh karena masalahnya production base pindah, memang itu sesuai dengan teori. Mau karena congestion cost mahal segala macam dia pinggir. Tapi itu masih mencerminkan Indonesia itu ya masih Jakarta dan surrounding area-nya. Jadi kalau misalnya teman-teman, saya nggak ada yang di pemerintahan yang ingin mendorong MP3I, itu masih ini berdiri aja 40 tahun kan, Pak 30 tahun dan reformasi 10 tahun kayak begini. Kalau membangun yang di luar Jawa lagi mungkin perlu 1 abad itu. Oke, mungkin itu saja Pak. Jadi bagaimana nih di kota-kota lain perkembangan seperti ini sebetulnya natural, alami, hanya tadi to what extent the planning professional atau profession anticipate dan influence klik in the policy maker. Mungkin itu saja.
Maybe you can just say that and then we have a discussion. So I think we have half an hour for discussion. Anybody? Yeah, maybe 3 for the first instance. Okay, silakan.
Thank you. Very interesting topic for today. My name is Suat. I'm from Bogor. About there's any zoning, industrial zoning, like high or medium, light industrial, or medium industrial, or heavy industrial. What the criteria of that zoning, if ever? This, if there's a zoning on the industrial area, it is have any consideration with the carrying capacity. This is the problem here. Is just put here, they never think about what the carrying capacity of the environment. It is it's only down the high-speed paddy areas is converted as the industrial area, like you see along the Suba. All the high-speed paddy now is converted to the textile industry, and also during Kerawang. So, there is any zoning policy. So, what about the commercial? Because we're talking about industrial, but commercial and industrial will be related. Like before, we're talking about the Kota Mandiri, but actually fail. Kota Mandiri is failed. Everybody goes to Jakarta. So, this is maybe that is ought to be a better planning for the Greater Jakarta. Thank you.
Maybe we just pull the questions first. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Also, this is an opportunity for networking and getting to know other researchers. So if you can introduce yourself, just briefly, from which institution and what you're working on.
My name is Liris from the Regional Economic and Inflation Division at Bank Indonesia. Question is, I have two questions. One is you mentioned about the centrist and decentrist perspective from the, I think, one of the interesting statement is there's a view of from some planners, I guess, that there's no advantage to be located in close proximity for industry. My question is, why? What's different there? What kind of assumption or reason behind that argument? Because in the area where the land is very expensive and you want to push for agglomeration in industry, I think that's the way to go. But I want to explore more what's the reason behind it. Second question is related to interdependency between Jakarta CBD and the surrounding. From Pak Komara, I guess the outcome is that Jakarta still hold a very important role, which is Tanjung Priok. I mean, we cannot move Tanjung Priok. So I'm assuming that's the dependency right there. That the other industrial estate or industrial area in Jakarta, they still rely on Tanjung Priok for now. Yet, we heard that the DKI Jakarta, the government would like to develop a area CAC, I guess, or kawasan ekonomi khusus, right, which is close to the port also. So I wonder if maybe some of you have an insight. What's the reason behind it? Because it seems for me that the government still, the DKI Jakarta government still doesn't want to, lost one of their main sector, which is industry. And from this discussion, I guess we agree that probably the best way is to have the type of development for industry outside of Jakarta. But I don't know whether there's still a feeling in the government of DKI Jakarta that they still want to maintain some sort of industry in the CBD area. And if so, if you were asked by the Jokowi, what kind of industry that you think is suitable for the KEK area? What kind of industry that you're going to recommend? Because light industry, probably they won't be able to afford a high land price in the KEK area. So it should be probably like an IT industry or something like that. But I don't know. What's your opinion on that? Thank you.
Anyone else? One more? No? Okay, go ahead, Pak. Pak Komara.
Thank you very much. I tried to respond, but this is very well discussion, and I'm not sure I can answer, and Pak Komara will help. So please. First is question from Paswati. Regarding like many industrial land is being built in the suburbs. There any zoning regulation about that. We have seen several districts, especially in Bekasi and Karawang. What is happening in Bekasi is from the beginning was anticipated as industrial areas, and that's the reason why in the 90s most of the industrial parks located in Bekasi. So the lands in Cikarang were in the special plan prepared for that. But there is some issues. Which coming first? Is it the ideas of the local government, or the local government is just adopt the ideas of the central governments and the privates? But in terms of specific zoning, as I mentioned to you, some districts, they're not yet have that kind of zoning. Maybe Jakarta has had zoning regulation. I don't know, maybe people from PU here can give me more exact data, but in my observations in some districts, like building codes, they don't have it. And zoning regulation, they're even still preparing the special plans, not yet into zoning regulations. And sometimes what is happening is they first who made the zoning regulation for their project areas. And maybe there are some possibility the local government would adopt it as a policy for surrounding areas. But at the higher special plan level, like you mentioned about agricultural areas, at least what we are observing in Karawang is the Lumbung Padi, what is it? Center of Rice Reservation in Indonesia, the largest padi reservations. They still keep maintaining the rice fields. I don't have the map, so Bekasi was lucky because it was like actually by Karawang district, but they don't have capacity to really realize it. But then it's captured by the provincial governments into the special plans, still not yet implemented. But then the investments coming in, yes, we can help realizing, and it seems now is the project is being started there in Cilamaya. because that's considering that in the next decade, the largest industrial concentration will be in Karawang, not anymore in Bekasi. So there will be something bigger than Bekasi in Karawang. Not just seaport, in fact. They are building a new airport here in Karawang, equal to the ones in Cekareng. And that's going to be equal to it. And it's very political lobby, top level lobby. And it's very much not anticipated by any plan in this country. That's one of the greatest projects ever and not anticipated in any plan, even in MP3IG. So that's what is happening. Yeah, that's a challenge for planning professionals. I think some people from PU could comment more precise about that. That's really a challenge indeed. Yeah, Kota Mandiri, this is another angle of research we are conducting in ITB. To which extent Kota Mandiri could solve some metropolitan problems like traffic jam, commuting, also economic dependency. And yes, that's true. I think your statement is true. Most of cases are failed. Actually, to some extent, what is happening in Cikarang is start to work. I mean, if we see other Kota Baru, like even the biggest one, BSD, they themselves acknowledge that they are still failed at attracting economic activities. Only housing and housing, people still work in Jakarta. In Cikarang, to some extent, the trends is the other way around start to happen, like people around not in Cikarang works in Cikarang, but it's still in the first phase is what I call in one of our research is post-suburbanization. If we see suburbanization is the dispersal of only the people, only the houses, but there is likely to happen in Cikarang is not the house, but also the economic activity, and in fact the social center like entertainment start to be built. It could happen that they are doing it, but another issue is still rising, as you mentioned, like social segregation. For whom this facility is created? Is it really for the people at large or only the people in the gated communities? And how, if this is public, to which extent that surrounding people could have access to it? That's another issue. But why industry? According to the centrist view, there is a possibility that different economic activities would not be next to each other anymore, as we found during, in economic terms, Marshallian situation where being next to each other is efficiency and blah 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 contacts. But the other way around would happen, according to hypothesis. It's still like undergoing research, but because they argue because of the technology. First is the transportation technology. It's getting cheaper compared to in the past. It's debatable. We can increase the fuel price, of course, but in overall technology, more and more people have easier access to transport than in the past, and also at least we can move by car even faster, and also the highways, more highways, and that makes 5 minutes in 1970s and 5 minutes in now is longer, except in Jakarta, of course. Even 1 hour would be the same. So, but
unless it's 4 a.m.
Yeah.
Then it's longer.
But that's good because at least you still can find.
I mean, but in our situation here, the oil price and pricing and everything else, it is more feasible for a more scientific theme or planning scheme, probably?
Well, yeah, actually, well, in general, at least at the current ammunition for planners, more we are looking like centuries is more easy to be managed, where people next to each other. But the challenge that the activities would be more sprawling. Actually, it's well, it's still. If I saw my data, it doesn't really strong in the sense like, yes, in the suburbs maybe it's less densely populated, or but the trend is the suburb is getting compact, but it's still in times, and that to some extent that easier for planners compared to you are managing different activities with long distance. As I mentioned, you truck factories. First, you build something in Karawang, and the other parts in somewhere else you have to go to buy, and that's congested, something like that. But that's still a challenge. We never know. It's like this is external to planners, like transportation technology. Maybe in the next future we can have a free fuel kind of car, then you can go wherever you like, and that's big problem for planners how to really manage the situation. Also, this communication technology, but it's still hypothetical. Like because of these mobile things, some activities which in the past we should have direct contacts, now we don't have to, and now so meaning you can be more distant from your colleagues within the same factories, for example. But that's still. I don't really believe in it, and it's still debatable. I think even technology is not solved or is not solve the problem. I think technology is creating new problems. You solve one problem, so maybe you create two other problems. So it's something we can debate and it's still a challenge for us. The last questions is about kind of industry that we can build in Jakarta. I think Pak Komara can answer much more, but as far as I'm concerned, Jakarta has already have regulation like any polluting industry is not anymore allowed in Jakarta, for sure. But economically, what kind of non-polluting industry that will be more desirable for Jakarta future, for example, I think that should be the research in itself. Of course, at least from my analysis, it should be less dependent on land because it's getting expensive, I think, and it should be industrial art needs more contact with the consumers, intensive contact with consumers, taking advantage of the proximity to the market as compared to if you are somewhere far away, and while the turn of your products is daily, or that's maybe a problem.
Just want to add, my colleague from Bank Indonesia keep questioning about the role of Jakarta. I think in terms of macro aspect, compared with Thailand, Malaysia, as we are lag behind because it's not competitive in many things actually. While we can argue that we do have relatively cheap labor, quote unquote, but in terms of infrastructure, even electricity, even it's not well designed, the industrial park, and so on and so on. And packing goes to Tanjung Priok only, so that's why. But again, the tug and war on, say, for example, or even click from Japan, still big appetite to have Jakarta MPA, right? Metropolitan Private Area, because they, but that's very limited capacity for the Indonesian competitiveness. Yes, Jakarta dibangunlah Selat Sunda, dibuininlah ini, very limited in terms of colleague in Thailand, Malaysia, for example. not mentioned in China. We are struggling 10.000 megawatt di China kan itu sebulan sekali itu 10.000 megawatt for example. So this for young generation here, as there are a lot of challenge. Kita baru mau mulai saja misalnya Pelindo untuk tahap itu diskusinya lama, 10 tahun itu. Saya masih di dalam waktu itu, susah sekali. Jadi misalnya even Tanjung Priok, somebody who's expert in port management confusing for Tanjung Priok. Ada ini, jadi raja-rajanya banyak di apa. How can we kind of bisa tambah bersaing, penguasanya banyak dan itu tidak bisa itu. Role and regulation-nya juga mengatakan seperti itu. Jadi sebetulnya agak miris juga kalau melihat seperti itu. Itu mengenai Jakarta. Kemudian begini, you was asking about what type of industry in Jakarta. Of course, in terms of regional government, they put some barrier to entry. Yeah, I think investor pasti akan inilah ya. Tapi sebenarnya yang dibutuhkan adalah tadi a big vision dari policy maker at center level sebenarnya. Karena kan di Jakarta level, apalagi dua pemimpin sekarang itu kan lebih ingin mensurfing komoditinya kan, yang kemarin itu kayak terlupakan segala macam, public mass transport, kemudian kekumuhan, segala macam. Nah mungkin yang besar itu dengan tadi studinya ITB sebetulnya udah memetakan itu ya, udah memetakan Samin, Cikarang dan Purwakarta, Samin Tangerang, kalau di Bogornya sedikit gitu ya. Ini bagaimana untuk lebih kompetitif lagi misalnya, kalau kita ingin memanfaatkan itu ya. Tapi yang headache-nya tadi itu, misalnya mengenai tanah gitu ya. Nah kemudian sharing information, last week saya diundang oleh teman-teman di kantor Menko untuk membahas mengenai roadmap for special economic zone. There are two already, one in Tanjung Lesung, one is ya sebenarnya yang Jakarta itu kan, satu lagi saya lupa ya di even Tanjung Lesung for example, di situ kan ada resource, ya, resource-nya punya bakri memang, ya, apa, dia memanfaatkan itu bisa nggak jadi spesial. Teman-teman di Banten supported, nggak tahu gimana tanahnya udah dikuasai oleh Jababeka, sehingga resort yang sangat remote itu tetap tidak akan terjamah. Karena kayaknya kita ya diundang pernah diskusi juga nih. Karena kan harus ada paling tidak akses jalan segala macam ke Tanjung Lesung itu. Nah ini hal-hal seperti itu menjadi sangat sulit pada sekarang. I think karena everybody's juga sering mendengar mengenai MP3EI ya. Ini juga challenge in terms of, ini kan relatively academic discussion ya. To what extent, for example, MP3EI setelah Pak SBY, misalnya itu karena kan itu penting juga ya, political support. Tetapi sebetulnya terlepas dari isu politik, kayaknya memang kita harus bergeser itu. Itu kan kalau teman-teman makro ya, dia memang nggak terlalu banyak ngomongin regional, ya, sehingga makro stability, so on, export, spaceless lah ya. Tapi begitu ada isu, ini ada apa istilahnya? Ada mesin ekonomi bergerak cepat di Cina, yang itu merembes, makanya ASEAN Community itu mau men-tap itu kan, rembesan kegiatan itu. Makanya baru ada beberapa orang, itu Indonesia juga kalau nggak connectivity dan lain-lainnya, kan juga kepulauan ya, juga tinggalin yuk. Sehingga teman-teman yang kewilayahan, sebetulnya kan, saya masih mahasiswa waktu dulu, itu konsep seperti ini itu udah, kalau dulu tuh ada deputi Bablas namanya Pak Majid Ibrahim, ya. Itu udah ada dengan juga teman-teman ITB, PWK, ya. Udah ada itu, cuman terlupakan, kemudian tahu-tahu gap makin jauh, ini juga worse kan antara Jawa dan luar Jawa dan lain-lain. Sekarang ada Asian community itu tidak lain untuk men-tap itu. Jadi sebetulnya I think if young people here keep watching on that direction, make that strategy, terlepas dari politik ya. Karena kan sebetulnya itu banyak juga yang tidak masuk akal sebetulnya itu. Beberapa itu, tapi udah lah kita dorong ya. Bahwa ini perlu nggak hanya cuma di Jawa gitu ya. Cuman itu still masih long way to go untuk ke arah sana. Karena kalau enggak untuk short run objektif, memang akhirnya investor dan orang nggak mau. Apalagi dia kalau ingin memanfaatkan domestic market, Jawa lagi, Jakarta lagi terus. Dan ini itu kan tadi saya cerita itu 30-40 tahun perkembangannya kayak gitu. Jadi kita 34 tahun lagi Jawa, Jakarta masih tetap favorit gitu. Jadi nah, sekarang bagaimana yang di luar Jawa itu? Bukan saya itu masih jauh. Tugas-tugas ini generasi muda. Mungkin itu tambahan saya hanya untuk ngomporin membuat visi ke depan. Walaupun dari segi mikro management, city management, urban development, to some extent is always lag behind as planner in the government, sehingga swasta yang lebih cepat melihat lihat aja kota-kota satelit walaupun ada permasalahan di sana sini ya, tapi dia kan lebih well managed itu kan, BSD, Cikarang sana dan lain-lain. Tapi yang at the core, at the center di mana tugas pemerintah kedodoran itu. Terutama misalnya kayak tadi di Jakarta itu, pada derajat tertentu memang ingin entertain middle class ke atas juga gitu. Tetapi tampaknya capacity di kotanya memang agak terbatas itu. Itu mungkin.
We have this room until 1 o'clock, so one more very short question.
Nama saya Tiono dari Indonesia. Singkat aja Pak Delik ya, Pak Komandan Pak Delik. Kalau saya lihat ini tadi yang disampaikan itu menggambarkan bahwa sebetulnya Jakarta sudah sangat mengsesak, Pak. Sangat mengsesak. Kemudian saya juga lebih concern ke masalah tadi porsinya meskipun masih besar 20%, tapi di Jawa itu udah boleh dibilang sangat ketinggalan. Nah, yang saya ingin komen atau pandangan dari Bapak berdua mengenai bagaimana kalau kemudian industri itu kita dorong semua keluar Jakarta karena memang keterbatasan lahan. Sementara Jakarta hanya fokus di services. Kemudian yang kedua, yang mungkin kemarin didiskusikan panjang lebar tapi sudah hilang kembali, apakah memang wacana untuk memindahkan ibu kota itu yang menjadikan kemudian itu seperti daya tarik magnet ya, itu perlu dihidupkan kembali sehingga dalam konteks pemerataan nantinya itu akan bisa bergeser, katakanlah ibu kota dipindahkan saja sudah ke daerah-daerah atau wilayah yang memang masih kosong, tanahnya masih luas, kemudian juga memang kapasitas ruangnya sendiri pun juga mendukung. Nah, ini saya mohon komen dari Bapak berdua. Saya kira itu aja, Bu. Terima kasih.
Ya, terima kasih Pak. Ini udah juga luas diskusinya, dan saya sebenarnya di beberapa medis juga tidak pernah selesai Pak diskusi tentang ibu kota gitu. Dan kalau saya mungkin menurut saya tidak hanya industri yang harus keluar dari Jakarta atau Jawa, jangan-jangan banyak kegiatan yang politik gitu misalnya. Cukuplah misalnya Jakarta itu memang service center, dan mungkin saja nanti tidak hanya Jakarta gitu ya. Yang mau saya garis bawahi itu sepertinya tidak ada negara sebesar kita yang masih memaintain satu kota menjadi pusat segalanya gitu. Itu tidak ada gitu. Jadi ya mau sebagus apapun rencana Jakarta, menurut saya itu istilahnya kalau itu sudah jenuh gitu ya. Mau datangkan planner secanggih apa di dunia ini, menurut saya Jakarta ini masanya akan selesai. Karena bagaimana bisa negara dengan penduduk 240 juta dan nanti katanya ingin jadi 10 besar, sentral semuanya ada di satu kota, itu siapa yang bisa mengelola seperti itu gitu. Semua juga sudah membagi wilayah, Cina sudah, Brazil, bahkan negara sekecil Malaysia pun seperti itu. Dan memang kalau memindahkan pusat aktivitas nasional, ya menurut saya tidak bisa tanggung-tanggung, harus punya leadership visi dari pemimpinnya. Kalau memindahkan masih di sekitar Jakarta ya sama aja menunggu masalah dalam 10 tahun gitu. Ya harus serius ya, kalau pindah ke Kalimantan gitu, misalnya Sumatera jadi pusat apa. Dan itu memang perlu, apa yang menurut saya kurang dari policy makers atau bahkan mungkin planner seperti saya dulu, politisi itu adalah vision, entrepreneurial ambition, itu yang kurang. Dan itu bedanya kenapa Cina bisa, karena mereka punya entrepreneurial ambition, mau ambil resiko, ayo kita coba bangun economic zone di kota mana yang dulu tidak pernah dikenal dunia dan sekarang jadi kota dengan daya saing yang tinggi gitu. Kalau tidak mau meng-capture apa istilahnya itu opportunity dan risk seperti itu, ya tidak akan pernah bisa. Pasti selalu berpikir, wah itu kan perlu 100 tahun, wah itu kan perlu bangun jalan, dan ini ya memang iya. Kalau tidak dibekali dengan ambisi yang itu ya tidak akan pernah terjadi menurut saya. Dan satu hal juga yang perlu saya garis bawahi dari riset saya terdahulu, menurut saya berhubungan bahwa memang ada cultural mindset gitu ya di masyarakat Indonesia ini, bahwa sentralitas kekuasaan itu masih suatu apa ya? Ya itu simbol masyarakat kita, artinya membagi peran Jakarta itu sesuatu yang secara politically menurut saya, meskipun seolah-olah banyak policy maker setuju, tapi banyak yang menurut saya tidak ingin itu terjadi, dan itulah jelasnya. Bagi saya karena tidak hidup di Jakarta tentu akan lebih mudah mengatakan itu. Saya tidak tahu yang tinggal di Jakarta seperti apa gitu, senang atau tidak kalau itu di Jakarta. Dan kita tahu bahwa Jakarta masih pusat kekuatan politik, ekonomi, dan mereka lah yang membuat keputusan.
Ya betul sekali, artinya ini nggak mudah nih. Kalau kita lihat sejarah di negara-negara lain, memang setup-nya itu saya selalu melihat ke teman-teman perkotaan atau juga teman-teman yang pembangunan. Kalau Anda lihat di kota-kota yang memang udah maju sih ya, itu jangkauannya itu memang 300-400 tahun suatu ibu kota itu. Nah, jadi kalau Bung Karno tahun 60-an dia udah, berarti jangkauan berpikirnya itu padahal dulu masih baru penduduk berapa Jakarta tuh. Nah sekarang kita saking mudah ininya udah nggak bisa, jadinya ribut terus gitu. Saya sebetulnya udah agak males tuh kalau ikut diskusi mau pindah atau enggak nih. Kayaknya memang perlu dewa penyelamat, pindah gitu ya. Karena berbagai kalkulasi kayak tadi itu. Misalnya gini ya, coba main ke Pasar Tanah Abang yang macet itu, karena saya sering diundang ke DKI di dinas itu, Jalan Petamburan, kan lewat jalan itu tuh orang Tanah Abang macet segala macam truk. Rupanya di situ center of distribution untuk ke seluruh Indonesia, dan kelasnya itu kelas menggulung karpet NTT. Jadi itu kita masih level gitu sebetulnya. Jadi kalau teman-teman perkotaan ada menganalisis, jadi ini sebetulnya kehidupan kota kita kehidupan abad ke-17 sebetulnya gitu. Itu menarik juga gitu. Jadi Tanah Abang tuh pusat-pusat kayak gitu. Padahal kita udah berhadapan dengan Cina, misalnya yang begitu mau imlek tuh apa, jeruk ada di seluruh jeruk kuning di seluruh Indonesia. Gimana dia planningnya itu mau. Jadi kita memang ini termasuk juga banjir ya Pak ya. Nah, ada rekan di Untar nih, kita diskusi banjir. Kekhawatiran saya adalah kita memang berkejaran dengan berbagai permasalahan sehingga banjir. Kayaknya sekarang kita mau ngomong apa juga mudah banjir tuh susah. Akhirnya keluar dengan sophisticated ide Great Sea Wall atau tunnel. Cuma begitu duitnya gede 200 triliun. Apa enggak gorong-gorong aja misalnya kayak gitu. Karena udah besar sekali gitu ini ya. Dan mungkin begini, yang sedihnya saya mungkin ingin memotivasi teman-teman Bank Indonesia ya. Mungkin at regional level itu memang perlu dimotivasi. You are center of growth, Medan, hey Sulawesi, hey Manado, sehingga mungkin mereka berlomba-lomba menarik itu. Karena kalau enggak ya bawa-bawa tahu lah, memang headquarternya di sini semua kan Pak. Jadi dan tadi kalau saya ngeliatnya dari zamannya Pak Harusara 40 tahun ada sih perubahan, tapi nggak banyak juga gitu. Setelah kita lihat ternyata Thailand udah lebih hebat, Malaysia lebih hebat, berarti kita kurang banyak orang kayak Pak Harto misalnya gitu. Nggak, ini hanya untuk jadi saya saya setuju sekali untuk regional development tempat lainnya. Kalau misalnya bikin dimotivasi, hey Anda tuh center of growth at what level gitu ya, Medan, Palembang, Surabaya, dan BI karena timnya tuh cukup kuat, pemahaman terhadap lokal ekonominya sekarang ya. Itu kalau teman keuangan sekarang saya lihat kan fokusnya ke desentralisasi, ngurutin penyerapan segala macam itu nggak kelar-kelar. Harusnya Bank Indonesia nih bekerja sama dengan berbagai perusahaan lokal untuk nge-push itu Pak.
Okay, thank you Pak Komar. Unfortunately, the room will be used so we cannot extend anymore. But big hands for the speakers. I hope you can join us again next week on the 18th, where Sekolah Delik will be
Kalau dibaca itu
urban issue.
penting untuk bagaimana